The knife was at Matthew Hale's throat before he had finished speaking his vow, and 40 orc warriors stood in a ring around the fire watching to see if he would flinch. He did not. "Say it again," Borgek Ironhide commanded, her voice low and rough as gravel dragged over stone. She held the blade herself, close enough that Matthew felt the cold kiss of iron against his pulse. Firelight painted her tusks amber and threw long shadows across the hide tents behind her. "Say it so my whole clan hears you, human. Say what you are promising, and know that if you break it, this knife finds your throat again, and next time I will not be merciful enough to warn you first." "I swear it," Matthew said, and his voice did not shake, though every instinct screamed at him to step back from the blade, from the ring of tusked faces lit orange by the bonfire, from the war drums that had only just gone silent. "By the road, by the shrines that line it, and by my own life, I swear that if your clan lays down its weapons and guards the pilgrims through your territory this season, I will bring proof to Lord Halstead that the Ironhide clan never raided a single soul on that road. I will clear your name or I will die trying." A murmur went through the gathered orcs, low and dangerous, like wind moving through dry grass before a storm. "Human oaths are wind," rasped the old orc woman standing at Borgak's shoulder, an elder named Vherga with silver rings threaded through both her tusks and a face seamed with more years than Matthew could guess. "They are worn to us as children. A human swears peace with one hand and draws a blade with the other. You would bind our chieftess to this man with marriage rights, Borgak. You would give him claim over you, over the clan's honor on nothing but his word." Borgak did not look away from Matthew's eyes. Up close, in the firelight, she was formidable in a way that stole the breath from his lungs, even with a knife, an inch from his skin. She stood a full head taller than him, her shoulders broad and powerful beneath fitted warrior's leathers dyed the deep green of forest shadow. The bodice laced tight up her front and cinched at a waist that curved sharp before flaring to hips wrapped in supple leather that moved like a second skin when she shifted her weight. Twin braids of black hair, threaded with small bones and beads of hammered copper, fell past her shoulders. Her eyes were a startling amber, sharp as a hawk's, and right now they were measuring him the way a woman measures the edge of a blade before she trusts it to save her life. "I have heard every warning you have to give me, Vherga," Borgak said, not unkindly, but with the flat finality of a chieftess who had already made her choice. "I have heard them since I could first hold a spear. Humans lie. Humans break their word. Humans smile at your fire and burn your camp before the coals go cold." She turned her head enough to address the ring of warriors without lowering the knife. "And I have watched this human track through territory no soldier of Halstead's would dare enter, alone, for 11 days, following the real raider's trail through bog and bramble while his own lord called for our extermination. I have watched him refuse 3 separate offers of gold to simply say what his lord wanted to hear. A man who will not sell a lie for gold does not usually spend it for free. Chieftess, I am betting the clan," Borgak said, cutting Vherga off, and for the first time something flickered beneath the iron of her voice, something that might have been fear dressed up as certainty. "I know what I am betting. I know what it costs us if I am wrong." Her amber eyes came back to Matthew's face, and he felt them like a physical weight. "So do not tell me the cost, old mother. Tell me instead what I already know, that if this human's word is wind, I will have handed our spears to men who want us dead, and there will be nothing left of the Ironhide clan by the first snow." The fire popped. Somewhere behind Matthew, a warrior shifted his grip on a spear, the leather creaking. He was aware, with the strange clarity that comes only in moments when a person might die, of how far he was from anything resembling safety. No lord's men behind him, no other human within 20 miles, nothing but his own 2 hands and the sound of his own voice standing between the Ironhide clan's survival and its destruction. "I am not asking you to trust every human," Matthew said quietly. "I am asking you to trust me. There is a difference, chieftess, and I mean to spend the rest of my life proving it to you if I have to." Something passed over Borgek Ironhide's face, then surprise, maybe, that he had not simply repeated his oath louder, that he had spoken instead to her, to the woman rather than the office. She held his gaze a moment longer. Then she drew the knife back from his throat, turned it, and drew its edge shallow across her own palm instead, hissing once at the sting. "Then bleed with me, Matthew Hale," she said, "and let the clan witness it. This is no human wedding with flowers and priests. This is Ironhide law. Blood binds. Words alone do not." He held out his hand without hesitation, though his heart hammered hard enough that he was certain she could hear it. She cut his palm as gently as such a blade allowed and pressed her bleeding hand to his, and the clan roared up around them, not in celebration exactly, not yet, but in acknowledgement. 40 voices raised into the night sky over a bargain that would either save them all or be the death of everyone gathered at that fire. That was the beginning. Everything after, the Pilgrim Road, the wayhouses, the dares that grew more dangerous with every mile, the ambush that nearly cost him his life in front of a crowd that called her a monster, and the slow, fierce, unlikely way they fell in love after they were already bound. All of it started there, with a knife at his throat and a chieftess betting everything she had on a huntsman's word. Matthew Hale had come to the deep woods 8 years before, a younger son with no land and no prospects, and Lord Halstead had given him a post that suited him better than any other man in the keep huntsman of the western wilds, answerable to no steward, no captain, no bell that summoned lesser men to supper. He tracked game through forests older than any castle, slept beneath pines when the mood struck him, and returned to the keep only when he had furs or meat or news worth the walking. He liked the solitude. He had told himself for years that he preferred it, the quiet company of trees and rivers to the noise and small cruelties of men, and mostly that had even been true. It was the Pilgrim Road that changed things. The old stone track that wound from the coastal towns up through the mountain passes to the shrine of St. Ilan, where the devout walked barefoot the last mile to beg blessings for sick children and failing harvests. For 3 generations the road had been safe enough, watched by wayhouse keepers and the occasional patrol, its shrines tended by quiet monks. Then the raids began, pilgrims robbed, wayhouses burned, a merchant caravan slaughtered to the last mule not 4 months past. Lord Halstead, under pressure from the Crown and the Church both, had declared the Ironhide clan responsible, for they held the forested hills the road cut through, and it was easier to blame tusked strangers than to look harder. Matthew had not believed it. He had hunted those hills for years. He knew Orc sign from bandit sign, the way another man might know his own handwriting, and what he found on the bodies of the slaughtered pilgrims did not match Orc weapons at all. Steel-forged crossbow bolts, the kind smithed in a proper forge, not the bone-end flint arrows the clan favored. He had followed that trail for 11 days through bog and bramble, as Borgek had said, and it had led him not deeper into Orc territory but skirting the very edge of it, toward a hidden camp flying no banner, manned by hard-eyed men who spoke the accent of the southern coast, not the mountains. He had gone to the Ironhide war camp not because he was ordered to, but because 11 days alone in the woods with the truth burning in his chest had left him with only one honest choice. He could have ridden back to Lord Halstead first. He had not, because he suspected rightly, as it turned out, that Halstead's steward wanted the war more than he wanted the truth, and that any evidence Matthew carried alone might simply disappear along with him. So he had walked into the war camp with empty hands raised and asked to speak to the chieftess, and that request alone should have gotten him killed. Instead, it had gotten him a knife at his throat, a blood oath, and 3 days later, a wife. The morning after the binding, Matthew woke on a bedroll inside a hide tent that smelled of wood smoke and leather, his palm throbbing faintly beneath its bandage, and found Borgek already awake, sitting cross-legged near the tent flap sharpening a hand axe with slow, unhurried strokes. "You did not run in the night," she said without looking up. "I confess I gave it perhaps 1 chance in 3. Where would I run to?" Matthew sat up, working the stiffness from his shoulders. You said yourself I walked 11 days through that bog alone. I am not built for running from things, Chieftess. Only toward them, usually badly." That earned him a look sharp, assessing, and he thought the faintest curl of amusement at one corner of her wide mouth. "Do not call me Chieftess when we are alone in a tent, husband. It is a title for councils and enemies. My name will serve." Borgek, then. He tried it carefully, the guttural weight of it unfamiliar on his tongue, and watched something shift in her expression, some wall lowering half an inch. "I meant what I swore at the fire. I intend to keep it." "I know you meant it last night," she said, setting down the axe. "Words are easy to mean at midnight with a blade at your throat and a whole clan watching. I will judge you by what you mean at midday, on a dull road with no one watching at all." She rose, unfolding to her full height inside the cramped tent, and he was struck again by how she filled a space, not merely with size, though there was plenty of that, but with a kind of certainty that made the air feel charged wherever she stood. "We leave for the road within the hour. 10 of my best warriors ride with us as escort. You will introduce me to your Lord Halstead as your wife, and we will see whether his word is worth anything at all." The Council of Elders had not agreed easily to the 10 warriors, and Viherga had argued bitterly against sending any at all. "Better," she said, "to keep every spear at the war camp in case the humans meant treachery." But Borgek had overruled her, arguing that a chieftess who hid behind her walls proved nothing, while a chieftess who walked the contested road herself, escorting pilgrims with her own warriors, gave the humans no excuse to claim the clan skulked and schemed in darkness. "It is a gamble within a gamble," she admitted to Matthew as they rode out from the war camp, her warhorse a shaggy, powerful mountain breed, nothing like the sleek destriers of Halstead's stables, pacing easily alongside his rangier gelding. "If your Lord Halstead means to use this marriage as a trap, I have just delivered him 11 more iron-hide throats to cut, including my own." "He won't," Matthew said, and then more honestly, "I don't know that for certain. But I know the men he answers to want this war ended more than they want it won. A dead pilgrim road serves no one's harvest. If I bring him proof the raids are the work of outlaws and not your clan, and I bring him a treaty besides, sealed in marriage, that is a victory he can carry to the crown. Men like Halstead love nothing so much as a victory they did not have to bleed for." Borgek considered that, her amber eyes fixed on the road ahead where it curved up into pine-shadowed foothills. "You understand him well for a man who claims to answer to no one." "I answer to the woods," Matthew said. "That does not mean I am blind to the men who pay my wages." She laughed then, a short surprised bark of sound, and it transformed her face entirely, the fierce chieftess softening for just a moment into something warmer, something that made Matthew's chest tighten in a way he did not examine too closely. "That is the first true thing you have said to me that was not a vow, huntsman. I find I like it better." The first wayhouse they reached, 2 days into the journey, was called the Pilgrim's Rest, a squat stone building with a thatched roof, and a low wall enclosing a muddy yard where travelers' mules and horses stood tethered. It also, Matthew realized as they approached, had a crowd of some 30 pilgrims and traders gathered in that yard, and every one of them went still and silent as Borgek Ironhide rode through the gate with 10 armed orc warriors at her back. "Sweet Iline preserve us," someone breathed. A woman snatched a child back against her skirts. A wayhouse guard half drew a sword before catching himself, aware of how badly outnumbered and outmatched his blade would be. "Stand easy," Matthew called out, swinging down from his gelding and putting himself, without quite deciding to, between the crowd and Borgek's horse. "These are not raiders. This is Borgek Ironhide, chieftess of the clan that holds the hill country north of here, and she rides under truce with Lord Halstead's blessing to see the road made safe for all of you." "Truce," spat a heavy-set merchant near the wayhouse door, his hand resting on a cudgel. "I lost my brother on this road not 4 months past, throat opened ear to ear. You'll forgive me if I don't drink truce wine with the ones who did it." "It was not her clan that did it," Matthew said, and something in his voice flat, certain, entirely without doubt, made even the merchant pause. I tracked the men who killed your brother myself, sir, for 11 days through the hill country, and their trail never once led into Ironhide land. It led to a hidden camp of outlaws flying no banner at all, men who wanted your grief pointed at orcs so no one would look for them instead. And who are you to say so? The merchant demanded. Matthew Hale, Lord Halstead's huntsman. He let that settle, watched a few faces shift at the name, since Halstead's huntsman was known, at least by reputation, up and down that stretch of country as a man who did not lie about what he found in the woods, whatever else might be said of him. And her husband, as of 3 nights past. That produced a silence of an entirely different quality, shocked, incredulous, several pilgrims making warding signs against ill luck, an old woman near the door crossing herself and muttering a prayer to St. Ilan under her breath. Borgak, still mounted, said nothing, but Matthew felt her gaze on the back of his neck, weighing how he handled the crowd, whether he would apologize for her presence or explain it away as some grim necessity. He did neither. She is my wife, he said again louder, and she and her warriors will be riding this road for the rest of the pilgrimage season, keeping it safe for every one of you, because that is the bargain we struck. You can thank her when the season ends and not one more of you has been robbed or killed between here and the shrine. Until then, I would ask you to remember that fear is not the same thing as truth, and none of you have anything to fear from her so long as you do not draw steel first. It did not win the crowd over, not that day, not with words alone. But it bought enough uneasy quiet that the wayhouse keeper, a thin, nervous man named Osric, agreed to let them stable their horses and take a private room for the night, so long as the orc warriors camped in the yard rather than inside. A compromise Borgak accepted with a short nod that told Matthew she had expected far worse. That night in the narrow room above the wayhouse's common room, with the sounds of the crowd below still murmuring uneasily about tusked riders and human huntsmen who married monsters, Borgak sat on the edge of the narrow bed and studied Matthew with an unreadable expression while he built up the small fire in the hearth. You did not flinch from them, she said. Even the fat one with the cudgel. I watched your shoulders. They did not so much as tighten. I have stood in front of angrier things than a merchant with a stick, Matthew said. A boar with 3 arrows in it and nothing left to lose is worse company than any crowd. That is not an answer to what I asked. She rose and crossed the small room, and he was abruptly, acutely aware of how little space it contained, how she seemed to take up twice the room a person her size ought to. Why did you not simply let them believe what was easier? It would have cost you nothing to stay quiet in that yard and let me and my warriors camp outside the walls unremarked. Because it would have been a lie, Matthew said simply, and I told you I meant to spend the rest of my life proving my word was worth something. That does not start only when it is convenient, Borgak. It starts in muddy wayhouse yards with merchants who want to hit someone with a cudgel. She was very close now, close enough that he could see the small scar that cut through one dark eyebrow, could smell wood smoke and leather and something underneath that was simply her. You are a strange man, Matthew Hale, she said low. My counsel warned me 100 times that human tongues say pretty things to get what they want. What do you want, huntsman, that you have not simply taken already? I am your wife by Ironhide law. I share your bed by that same law tonight if you wish to claim it. The words hung there, blunt and orc plain, no coyness in them at all, and Matthew felt his pulse jump even as he made himself answer honestly rather than simply reaching for her the way every instinct in his body urged. I don't want a wife who shares my bed because a law tells her to, he said. I want, he stopped, searching for words that would not sound like flattery, because he suspected flattery was exactly the kind of human lie she had been warned about her whole life. I want you to choose it, whenever that happens, if it happens. I can wait for that longer than most men, I think. I've had a great deal of practice being patient with things that take time to trust me. Something in her face changed then, some careful mask slipping, and for a moment she looked almost startled, as though she had braced for one answer and received an entirely different one. Then, unexpectedly, a slow smile spread across her wide mouth, sharp-edged with her tusks but genuinely warm. "Careful, husband," she said, stepping back at last, putting a merciful distance between them that let Matthew breathe again. "A patient man is dangerous to an orc woman's pride. We are not used to being made to wait for what we want. You may find I choose sooner than you expect, simply to spite the waiting." She took the bedroll on the floor that night, leaving him the narrow bed, and Matthew lay awake a long while listening to her breathing even out into sleep, thinking that he had walked into more danger marrying Borgek Ironhide than he ever had tracking outlaws through 11 days of bog, and that he did not regret a moment of it. The dares began 3 days later, on a stretch of road that climbed along a river gorge, where an old rope and plank bridge swayed 40 feet above white water that would have killed anyone who fell wrong. "You hesitate," Borgek observed, watching Matthew eye the bridge with the frank caution of a man who had seen exactly how badly rotted rope bridges tended to fail. "For a huntsman who claims 11 days through bog without complaint. I hesitate because that bridge has seen 40 winters if it's seen one," Matthew said, "and I'd rather not test whether Ironhide law honors widows' chieftess." "A dare, then," Borgek said, and there was a gleam in her amber eyes that he was coming to recognize mischief wrapped in warrior pride, the kind of challenge an orc woman offered when she wanted to see what a man was truly made of. "I will cross first. If it holds my weight, which is considerably more than yours, huntsman, you have no excuse left to be a coward about it." "I'm not being a coward," Matthew said. "I'm being sensibly afraid, which any man with functioning senses would be." "Then prove your senses functioning are not simply cowardice with better manners." She was already stepping onto the first plank, testing it with her weight, and Matthew's heart climbed into his throat watching the whole structure sway under her. She crossed with the easy, unhurried confidence of someone who had crossed 100 worse bridges in her life, boots sure on rotted wood, hands skimming the guide ropes rather than gripping them white-knuckled. On the far side she turned, arms crossed, tusks bared in a grin. "Your turn, husband, unless you would like your wife to carry you across like a sack of grain in front of my warriors." The 10 Ironhide warriors behind them were already grinning, one of them a broad-shouldered young orc named Drask who had appointed himself something like Borgek's second in all matters, calling out something in the orc tongue that made the others laugh. "What did he say?" Matthew asked. "He said he will place a wager on whether you cross standing or crawling," Borgek called back, delighted. "I told him I would not take that wager as I already know the answer. Prove me wrong, huntsman." There was nothing for it but to cross, and Matthew did, hands gripping the guide ropes rather harder than he would have liked to admit, the bridge swaying alarmingly with every step, the river roaring white and cold beneath him. He made it to the far side without crawling, though his knees were considerably weaker than he'd have liked, and Borgek caught his arm as he stepped off the last plank, steadying him with a grip that could have crushed stone but held him with surprising gentleness. "There," she said. "You did not crawl. I am almost disappointed. I had a fine jest prepared about carrying you the rest of the road myself." "Next time," Matthew said, still catching his breath, "you can save the jest. I'll cross first." "Will you?" Her eyes glinted. "Then here is a dare returned, huntsman, since you are so eager to prove your nerve. Tonight at camp you will eat what my warriors eat, prepared as we prepare it, no complaint, no human squeamishness. If you manage the whole bowl without your face going the color of curdled milk, I will owe you a boon of your choosing. And if I fail?" "Then I choose the boon instead," she said, "and you will not enjoy discovering what an Orc Chieftess considers a fitting forfeit." That night around the campfire, Matthew ate a bowl of something Drask called mountain cat stew, thick with unfamiliar spices that set his mouth burning, and organ meat he chose very deliberately not to ask questions about, while 10 orc warriors watched with unconcealed glee and Borgek watched with something closer to genuine interest, arms folded, waiting to see if he would break. He did not, though sweat beaded on his forehead by the third bite, and he suspected his eyes had gone rather red-rimmed by the last. When he set the empty bowl down and managed, through streaming eyes, to say, "Needs more salt," the whole camp erupted into orcish laughter, Drask pounding him on the back hard enough to nearly send him face first into the fire. And Borgak laughed too, unguarded and delighted, a sound Matthew found he wanted to hear again as often as he could manage. "You have won your boon," she told him later, once the fire had burned low and most of the warriors had rolled into their furs to sleep. "Name it, husband. I am a woman of my word, whatever else my clan may say of your kind's honesty." Matthew considered her for a long moment in the dying firelight, weighing what he wanted against what he thought he could reasonably ask for, and settled in the end on something that surprised her. "Tell me something true about yourself," he said. "Not chieftess business, not clan law, something no one else on this road knows." Borgak's brows rose. Whatever she had expected, some request for a kiss perhaps, or some other bold human overture, it plainly was not this. She was quiet a moment, studying the fire, and when she spoke her voice had lost its usual battle edge, gone softer, more private. "I did not want to be chieftess," she said. "My mother held the title before me, and my elder brother was meant to take it after her, until a human raid 3 summers past put an arrow through his throat during what was supposed to be a truce parley. I was given the title because the clan needed one and I was what remained, not because I ever wanted the weight of it. Every dare I make, huntsman, every hard bargain, every knife I hold to a stranger's throat, all of it is a woman terrified that she is not equal to what was placed on her shoulders, doing her very best that no one, especially not her own clan, ever sees that fear." The confession hung in the night air, raw in a way Matthew had not expected, and he understood with sudden clarity exactly how much courage it had cost her to bet the whole clan on him. Not the careless courage of someone who feared nothing, but the harder, costlier courage of someone who feared everything and did the brave thing regardless. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for trusting me with that. Do not make it a habit, expecting truths from me so easily," Borgak said, though her voice had none of its usual bite. "I will need new dares to win them from you in turn, husband, if you keep collecting my honesty so cheaply." "I'll take that as a challenge," Matthew said, and when she smiled at him across the fire, something warm and dangerous settled into his chest that felt a great deal like falling. They reached the shrine of St. Marta, a smaller waypoint shrine a week further along the road, on a bright cold morning when a party of some 60 pilgrims had gathered to make their devotions before continuing on toward the greater shrine of St. Ilan. The pilgrims' reaction to Borgak and her warriors was worse here than at the wayhouse. Several dropped to their knees praying loudly for protection. A priest came out waving a censer of smoking incense, as though it might ward off orcs the way it warded off evil spirits, and one young man threw a stone that struck Drask on the shoulder before Matthew managed to step between the crowd and the warriors, hands raised. "Enough," he said, sharp enough to cut through the priest's chanting. "These people are your escort, not your enemy. Anyone who throws another stone will answer to Lord Halstead's huntsman for it, and I promise you that answer will not be pleasant." Borgak had gone very still on her horse, her jaw tight, and Matthew could see the effort it cost her not to respond to the thrown stone the way every instinct in her surely screamed at her too. Instead, she raised a hand to Drask, who had gripped his axe, and shook her head once sharply, a silent command, "Stand down." Then she dismounted, slowly, deliberately, and walked toward the shrine itself, a simple stone alcove holding a weathered statue of St. Marta, hands outstretched in blessing, and knelt before it in the mud, in full view of 60 pilgrims who had called her a monster moments before. "I do not know your saint," she said, loud enough to carry, "but I know what it is to walk a hard road hoping something on the other end of it will forgive you for what you have had to do to survive it. If your saint hears prayers from orc lips, I ask her the same mercy I ask of you, to judge me by what I do on this road, not by what my kind has done on others." The silence that followed was profound. The priest lowered his censer. The young man who had thrown the stone would not meet anyone's eyes. And when the pilgrims resumed their own devotions moments later, subdued and uncertain, Matthew caught Borgek's eye across the shrine yard and saw in her expression something that looked almost like relief at having found the words. And beneath that, something warmer still, aimed at him, gratitude, perhaps, that he had given her the room to try. That night, camped a mile beyond the shrine, Borgek found him checking the picket lines on the horses and settled beside him without a word, close enough that her shoulder nearly brushed his. "I have a dare for you," she said, "though I confess this one is less a test of nerve than the others. I'm listening." "Kiss me," she said plainly, the way she said everything, no coyness dressing it up. "Not because Ironhide law says you may, not because a bet demands it. I am asking you to choose it the way you asked me to choose things of you. So, choose, huntsman." Matthew turned to look at her fully, found her amber eyes steady on his in the dark. No fear in them at all, only that same fierce open honesty she had shown him at the shrine, and something in his chest that had been carefully, patiently waiting for weeks simply came undone. He kissed her. It was not gentle, not at first. She met him with the same directness she brought to everything, her hand coming up to cup his jaw with surprising tenderness for someone who could break bone without much effort, and he felt her breath catch, felt the fierce chieftess soften against him into something that was simply a woman, wanted and wanting. And when they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard, foreheads pressed together in the dark. "Well," Borgek said unsteadily, a laugh threading through the word, "I believe I have lost that particular wager rather badly, huntsman. I intended to remain the one setting the dares between us. I did not intend to want the next one nearly this much. We can call it even," Matthew murmured. "I've been wanting to do that since the rope bridge and possibly before." "Since the bridge," she said, delighted and scandalized in equal measure. "You hit it well. I told you, I've had practice being patient." "Do not grow too fond of your patience," she said, pulling him back toward her by the front of his tunic. "I find I have very little left myself." The days that followed carried a different charge between them, not less dangerous, for the road itself grew more perilous the further they traveled, but warmer, threaded through with stolen touches at the fire, with Borgek's hand finding his while they rode, with dares that had less to do with proving nerve and more to do with simply wanting an excuse to be close. But danger had not left the pilgrim road, and it found them at the town of Millhaven, 3 weeks into the journey, in a manner none of them had anticipated. Millhaven was the largest town the pilgrim road passed through, a walled market town with a proper garrison and a weekly market that drew traders from 3 counties. Lord Halstead himself was due there within the week to inspect the treaty's progress, and word of the huntsman's orc wife had run ahead of them like wildfire, so that when Matthew and Borgek rode through Millhaven's gates with their escort, the market square was already thick with onlookers, merchants, farmers, off-duty soldiers, children perched on their fathers' shoulders to gawk at the tusked warriors riding through their town. It should have been simply an uncomfortable gauntlet of stares and murmured insults, survivable the way the wayhouse crowd had been survivable. Instead, as they crossed the square toward the inn where lodging had been arranged, a crossbow bolt hissed out of an upper window and buried itself in the wooden support post not a foot from Matthew's head. Chaos erupted instantly. The crowd screamed and scattered. Borgek's warriors wheeled their horses, weapons coming up, and a second bolt hissed down, this one aimed truer, meant for Matthew's chest as he sat stunned on his rearing gelding, and there was no time for him to move, no time for anything at all. Borgek moved instead. She threw herself from her horse in a single motion, crossing the space between them faster than anyone watching would have believed a woman her size could move, and put her own body between Matthew and the bolt's path a heartbeat before it would have struck him. It took her instead, low in the shoulder, the impact spinning her half around with a grunt of pain she bit down hard rather than let become a scream. And then she had Matthew's collar in her fist, and was hauling him bodily off his rearing horse and down behind an overturned market stall, shielding him with her own body, while the panicked crowd screamed and scattered around them, and Drask's voice bellowed orders to the other warriors in the orc tongue. Borgak, Matthew's hands found the bolt in her shoulder, blood already soaking dark through her leathers. "You're hit, you're—" "I am aware," she gritted out, and even now, wounded, bleeding, she had positioned herself so that her body still blocked any angle a third bolt might take toward him. "Stay down, husband. This is not the moment for your stubborn pride." Across the square, in full view of perhaps 200 townsfolk who had gathered for market day, and instead found themselves witnessing something none of them would ever forget, Drask and two other warriors had already located the window the bolts had come from, and were storming the building's stairs. What followed took less than 2 minutes but felt, to Matthew, like an hour shouting, the crash of a door breaking from its hinges, and then Drask dragging a struggling man out onto the balcony above the square by the collar, a man in fine city clothes that marked him as no common bandit. "Sir Roderic's man," someone in the crowd shouted, recognizing the captured assassin's livery beneath his cloak, and the name rippled through the square with dawning, horrified understanding. Sir Roderick Aldwyn held lands bordering Halstead's own, lands that included the very hill country the Ironhide clan called home lands he had coveted openly for years, and had every reason in the world to want emptied of both orcs and any peace treaty that might keep them there. It was Sir Roderic's men, then, who had been raiding the Pilgrim Road all along, framing the orcs to provoke a war that would let him seize contested land, once Halstead's forces cleared it of its current inhabitants. And it was Sir Roderic's man who had just tried to murder the one witness capable of proving it, in the middle of a crowded market square, in front of 200 people. And it was Borgak Ironhide, the chieftess half of Millhaven, had spent weeks calling a monster, a beast, a creature to be feared and driven off, who had thrown herself in front of a killing bolt to save a human's life without a heartbeat of hesitation, bleeding now in the mud of their own market square for a man they had thrown stones at not so many weeks before. The crowd's silence, when it came, was total. Matthew knelt over Borgak amid the wreckage of the market stall, pressing his palm hard against the wound in her shoulder to slow the bleeding, and looked up to find every eye in the square fixed on them both, not with fear now, but with something closer to shock, to shame, to the dawning, uncomfortable recognition of having been entirely wrong about someone. "Someone get a healer," Matthew shouted, and it was an old woman from the crowd, one of the pilgrims who had prayed loudly against Borgak's presence not 3 weeks before at the wayhouse, who came running forward first with clean linen and a jar of salve, dropping to her knees in the mud beside them without a moment's hesitation. "Hold still, chieftess," the old woman said, her hands surprisingly steady as she worked. "Whatever else is true in this world, a woman who takes an arrow for her husband in the open street has earned the right to my hands, monster or not. I do not think you are a monster, not anymore. I do not think I have thought that since I watched you kneel at St. Marta's shrine, if I am honest with myself." Borgak, pale with pain but conscious, managed a thin, fierce smile up at Matthew rather than the old woman. "Well, husband," she said, her voice tight but steady, "I believe that answers whether an Orc Chieftess's word is worth anything at all. Perhaps now your Lord Halstead's people will ask themselves whether the same might be true of a human's, when a man refuses payment to say what is convenient and tracks 11 days through a bog instead." "You could have died," Matthew said, hands still pressed hard against her wound, his voice rough with a fear that had nothing to do with crossbows and everything to do with how close he had come to losing her. "You threw yourself in front of that bolt without even thinking. I thought about it a great deal, actually," Borgak said. "I thought about it the entire time you have been proving your word to me, mile after mile, dare after dare. I decided some weeks ago, huntsman, long before this square, that I did not intend to let anything take you from me while I had the strength to stop it. This was simply the day that decision was tested. Lord Halstead arrived in Millhaven 2 days later to find the town transformed not by fear of orcs, but by fury at Sir Roderick Aldwyn, whose captured assassin had confessed everything under questioning. The false flag raids, the years of careful plotting to seize Ironhide land, the crossbow bolts meant for the one huntsman capable of unraveling it all. Halstead, no fool despite his earlier eagerness to blame convenient enemies, moved swiftly and decisively once the truth was laid before him in a public square full of witnesses who had seen an Orc Chieftess bleed to save a human huntsman's life. Sir Roderick was stripped of his lands and titles within the fortnight, the true bandits hunted down and hanged, and the treaty between Lord Halstead and the Ironhide clan, the same treaty Matthew had sworn to secure with his own life at that first fire, was formally sealed with Halstead's own seal, guaranteeing the clan's hill country and the pilgrim road both under joint protection, no longer contested ground for any ambitious lord to covet. Borgek's wound healed slowly over the following weeks, tended in the same wayhouse room where Matthew had first told her he would not claim a wife who did not choose him. She healed with the same fierce impatience she brought to everything, chafing against the enforced rest, needling Matthew constantly for new dares she was too weak yet to attempt, until he finally relented one evening and proposed one gentle enough to satisfy her without tearing her stitches, a wager over which of them could tell the better lie convincingly enough to fool Drask, who came to check on his chieftess each evening and left each time thoroughly bewildered by the strange, warm laughter he found inside that little room. It was during those weeks of healing that the deepest intimacy between them finally bloomed, unhurried now that the immediate danger had passed, built on everything that had come before: the dares, the confessions traded around campfires, the blood oath at the beginning and the blood spilled in the market square since. There was no council watching this time, no clan to witness or bind them, only the two of them, alone in lamplight, choosing each other freely at last with nothing at stake but their own hearts. Matthew learned the particular gentleness Borgak allowed no one else to see, the way her fierce chieftess's composure fell away entirely when it was only the two of them, replaced by something tender and hungry and wholly hers to give. When he finally kissed the old scar along her collarbone, worn from some battle years past, and she pulled him close with a soft, unguarded sound that had nothing of the war camp in it at all, he understood that whatever had begun as a blood-bound bargain between a desperate chieftess and a huntsman with nothing to offer but his word had become, somewhere along that long and dangerous road, the truest thing either of them had ever known. "I did not think I would ever say this to a human," Borgek murmured against his shoulder in the quiet dark, her fingers tracing idle patterns over his chest. "But I am glad, Matthew Hale, that my counsel's warnings were wrong about you. I am glad I bet the clan on your word. I would do it again, knowing everything I know now, without hesitating even a moment longer than I did the first time." "I'm glad you did too," Matthew said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Though I'll admit the knife at my throat was not my favorite part of the wager." "No," she agreed, laughing softly, "but you must admit it made an excellent beginning to a very good story." By the time the pilgrimage season ended, with the first hard frosts silvering the hill country and the last pilgrims of the year making their way home from the shrine of St. Ilan without a single robbery or ambush along the entire length of the road, the Ironhide clan's name had been fully restored, not merely cleared of the false accusations, but honored, spoken of in wayhouses and market towns alike, as the clan whose warriors had guarded the road all season without a single incident, whose chieftess had bled in a public square to save a human's life. Matthew and Borgek returned to the Ironhide war camp together for the first true winter of their marriage, no longer a chieftess and a huntsman bound by desperate necessity and a blood oath sworn at knife point, but a wife and husband who had chosen each other freely mile after mile, dare after dare, danger after danger, until choosing had become simply the truth of what they were. Virga met them at the edge of the camp. The old elder's seemed face unreadable as she studied the pair of them. Matthew thinner than when he'd left, weathered further by the road, and Borgak healed but scarred anew at the shoulder, riding close beside him with an ease that spoke of months of hard-won trust. "I warned you never to trust a human's word, Chieftess," Virga said at last, without preamble. "I have heard from every trader and pilgrim who has passed this way in the last month what that word bought us. I have heard of a market square, and a bolt meant for your husband, and a chieftess who bled rather than let it find its mark." "You heard correctly," Borgak said, dismounting, standing tall and steady before the old woman who had questioned her judgment at that very first fire. "I bet the whole clan on his word, old mother, exactly as you warned me never to do. I would tell you I am sorry for it, but I find I am not sorry at all. I would make the same wager again tomorrow, and every day after for as long as I live." Virga was silent a long moment, her old eyes moving between them, weighing something Matthew could not guess at. Then slowly she inclined her head not quite a bow, but as close to one as the fierce old elder was likely ever to offer a human. "Then I was wrong to warn you," she said simply, "and I am glad, for the clan's sake and for yours, Chieftess, that you did not listen." She turned her gaze to Matthew directly, something almost warm in it now. "You kept your word, huntsman. That is rarer among your kind than you might think, and rarer still among mine to admit it plainly. Welcome home." That winter passed slower and gentler than either of them had any right to expect after so hard-won a beginning. The war camp settled into its seasonal rhythms, warriors mending gear and hunting the last of the autumn game before the deep snows came, and Matthew found himself, to his own quiet surprise, settling into that rhythm alongside them, teaching Drask and the younger warriors the human tracking methods that had served him so well in the deep woods, learning in turn the orc ways of reading weather and stone that had kept the clan alive in that hill country for generations before any human road had cut through it. He was no longer merely Lord Halstead's huntsman answering to no one. He had found, unlooked for, a second belonging entirely his own, earned mile by mile and dare by dare on a road that had tried more than once to kill him for it. There came an evening near the solstice, the coldest of the season, when the war camp's central fire burned high against the dark, and the whole clan gathered for the telling of the year's stories, as was Ironhide custom. The way a people kept their history alive, spoken aloud around flame rather than written on any page. Drask told, with considerable embellishment, of the rope bridge and the mountain cat stew, to great laughter from the assembled warriors. An old warrior named Kelt told of the day Borgak had first taken up the chieftess's mantle, young and grieving and terrified, though he was kind enough not to name the fear outright. And then Borgak herself rose, drawing Matthew up beside her by the hand in front of the whole gathered clan, firelight dancing gold across both their faces. "I was warned that first night at this very fire," she said, her voice carrying easily over the crackle of flame and the hush of attentive silence, "never to trust a human's word. I was told that words alone were wind, that only blood and law could bind such a bargain safely. I believed that warning. I still believe it mostly, when it comes to strangers and lords who have never once bled beside me." She turned to look at Matthew, and whatever composure she usually wore as chieftess fell away entirely, leaving only the woman beneath it, open and unguarded before her whole clan. "But I learned this year that some words are not wind at all. Some words are a huntsman walking 11 days through bog alone, because the truth mattered more to him than his own safety. Some words are a man refusing gold to say what was easy, and choosing instead what was true. I bet this whole clan on such a word, and I would not trade what it won us for anything the old, safer warnings might have spared me instead." She lifted their joined hands, blood-scarred palm to blood-scarred palm, the same hands that had first been cut and pressed together at that opening fire so many months before. "Matthew Hale kept his word," she said simply, to the whole assembled clan, to Virga watching with quiet approval, to Drask grinning around the fire, to every warrior who had ridden that dangerous road beside them both. He is Ironhide now, not merely by the law that bound us that first night, but by his own choosing, mile after mile, danger after danger. I would have every one of you remember that the next time some human rides into this camp with fine words and empty promises. Not all of them are wind. This one was not. The clan's roar of approval that followed was warmer than the roar that had greeted their first binding, less a wary acknowledgement of a desperate gamble, and more a genuine celebration of something that had proven itself true and lasting. Matthew, standing at Borgak's side with her hand warm and strong in his, thought of the lonely years he had spent in the deep woods before that first fire, answering to no one, belonging fully to no one, and understood with quiet, overwhelming certainty that he would not trade this fire, this clan, this fierce and magnificent woman who had bet everything she had on his word, and won for any solitude he had ever mistaken for peace. The following morning broke clear and cold over the war camp, the first true dawn after a night of celebration that had run long past midnight, frost silvering the hide tents and the bare branches of the pines beyond. Matthew woke before Borgak, as he sometimes did, and slipped out from beneath the firs to stand at the tent's entrance and watch the sun climb pale gold over the eastern ridgeline, the whole hill country hushed and still beneath its first proper snowfall. He heard her stir behind him, and then felt her arms slide around him from behind, her chin resting against his shoulder, her body warm against the cold morning air. "You are awake too early, husband," she murmured. "There is no danger left on this road for you to hunt this morning. No bolts to dodge, no bandits to track, no counsel to convince. Come back to bed." "I was only thinking," Matthew said, leaning back into her, "how strange it is that everything started with a knife at my throat and now here we are." "Not so strange," Borgak said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "I told you that first night I was betting everything on your word. I did not say I expected to lose that bet, huntsman. I have never much cared for wagers I did not intend to win." Below them, the war camp was beginning to stir, warriors emerging into the frosty morning to tend fires and horses, the ordinary business of a clan whose survival was no longer in doubt, whose road was safe, whose name had been cleared, and whose chieftess stood before them not diminished by her marriage to a human, but strengthened by it, having proven, in front of everyone who had ever doubted her, that her judgment and her word were both worth trusting absolutely. Matthew turned in her arms to face her properly, framed against the pale gold dawn, and found in her amber eyes none of the wariness that had first met him at that opening fire, only the same fierce, open certainty she had shown him at the shrine, at the rope bridge, in the mud of the Millhaven Square with a crossbow bolt buried in her shoulder. The certainty of a woman who had bet everything on him and had never once, since that first terrifying night, regretted the wager. "I love you," he said simply, the words easier now than they had ever been anything else between them. "I have for a long while, I think. I was only waiting for the right dare to say it." "Then I am glad I did not have to set that one myself," Borgak said, and kissed him there in the cold, clear morning, with the whole clan waking around them and the pilgrim road lying safe and quiet beyond the ridge, the storm of raids and treachery and doubt finally, fully past. "Because I do not think I could have borne waiting on you for that particular truth much longer, huntsman. Some things a chieftess should not have to dare a man into confessing. Some things he ought simply to give her freely." "Then take it freely," Matthew said, "all of it, for as long as you'll have me." "That," Borgak Ironhide said, drawing him close against the dawn, "will be considerably longer than either of us can yet imagine, husband. I intend to hold you to every word of it." And there, on that quiet frozen morning, with the pilgrim road stretching safe below them, and the whole hard winter of doubt and danger finally behind them, the two of them stood together at the edge of the war camp, the only two people in the world who mattered in that moment, having weathered every storm the road and its enemies could throw at them, and found at the end of it not merely survival, but something far rarer and far better, a love neither of them had dared hope to find, chosen freely, proven fully and built to last.